Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This feels like the event we should have had 2 years ago. After October the 7th, when we saw the lack of empathy, the lack of sympathy that there was towards Jews and Israelis, after the atrocities of October the 7th were flashed on our screens, and we saw people celebrating at the embassy, the Israeli embassy, on October the 8th and 9th, this should have been the response that we saw. People taking sides and people recognizing the scale and the severity and the issues at stake when people fail to see pogroms and atrocities and fail to call them out. So we are where we are, and in some ways we are in a different place than perhaps we would have been 2 years ago. Because as you can see from the slides that we're cycling through earlier, there is now a family of campaigns that are standing up against anti-Semitism and calling out the fact that we should be taking sides. There's Stop the Hate, formerly called Enough is Enough. Amazing campaign. Itai sitting down here, incredible work. There's the British Friends of Israel, who were extremely important. We're going to hear later from Allison Pearson. She was one of the founders. Because the British Friends of Israel very quickly put out afterwards, after October the 7th, the October Declaration, which I'm sure a lot of you know and signed. And they provided a really simple, straightforward moral compass for people. They set the dial on exactly where we should stand, and it was an inspiration for a lot of people. And then I think, obviously you know because you're here, the campaign Our Fight, the campaign that we set up. And the reason we wanted to have this meeting, so Our Fight and the British Friends of Israel have worked together on this meeting tonight. The reason we wanted to have this meeting is because we felt that the stories and the truths of October the 7th were being not just described as being untrue, not just being in denial, but actually being swept under the carpet, being made irrelevant. I mean, what conclusion can you come to when you see our government and many other governments around the world recognizing a state of Palestine, even whilst half of that state, so-called, is headed by a terrorist organization which still holds 48 hostages, an organization that is bartering in corpses, and our government saw fit to recognize that state. So what conclusion can you come to other than October the 7th is irrelevant? So we were determined to make sure that didn't happen, and I thank you all for coming out. So what you're going to hear this evening are a number of interviews. We're going to have people talking about experiences related to October the 7th, some of them their own experiences, some of them experiences where they were concerned about a loved one. Some people lost loved ones. Some people, their children narrowly escaped Nova. So you're going to hear some pretty tough stories, and we want those stories to go out there. So we want people here in this room, we want people who are watching on the live stream, we want you to take these stories and tell them to people. When people are talking about October the 7th and the war at work or in your trade union or in your schools, Tell people these stories. Tell them what you heard tonight. It's going to be tough. They're going to be hard stories, but they have to be repeated because this is the truth of what happened on October the 7th. So, let's start. Our first interview is with somebody who I'm sure is going to get a massive cheer when she comes up. Emily Schrader. Good to see you. Good. Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us. I first met you at Mornington Crescent, and there will be a number of people in this room who were involved on one of the very first activities that, as they were called then, Enough is Enough organized. So you were there with a megaphone, making speeches, doing chants, generally...
I think I lost my voice that day.
Yes, I think you did, counter-protesting against a little march that was there. So I just thought, this is Emily, and we went to the pub afterwards, we all had a drink, and this is Emily the activist. But then later I saw Emily on Israeli TV. So it turns out Emily the activist is also Emily the journalist. She's an anchor on TV in Israel. She's written books. She frequently writes articles. This week she's been on the TV in Britain talking about the Manchester attacks at the synagogue in Manchester and, of course, October the 7th. So she's an amazing person to talk to because she is incredibly knowledgeable, but equally she's quite happy to get out there and lose her voice for the cause. So please welcome Emily.
Thank you.
So, do you mind if I start with probably a tough question? So the other evening, Stop the Hate organized a very impressive vigil for October the 7th. There were lots of very powerful speakers, and I think during Tikva, I looked over and you were crying. I was the other side, and I just happened to look up, and you were crying. Would you tell us what that was all about?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to cry tonight. But I have to say it's very, very difficult. First and foremost, because I can't believe, oh, no, I'm going to cry. I can't believe that it's been 2 years and we still have 48 hostages in Gaza. And it's the culmination, I think, of hearing these stories and knowing a lot of these families, reporting every single awful thing that has happened in the last 2 years on the news, interviewing them, having to live stream the return of these hostages in those disgusting ceremonies that Hamas put on of returning, in some cases, bodies of children that they kidnapped and murdered, and the betrayal that I think everyone here probably understands from countries like the UK, from even the United States, throughout Europe we've seen this, and throughout the world. Canada as well, Australia, seen some of the worst anti-Semitism over the last 2 years. And you would think that after the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, after the butchering, the barbaric torture and sexual violence against innocent civilians, 378 of which were murdered at the Nova Festival. 1,195 were murdered total on October 7th, including more than 50 children. 250 people were kidnapped and taken into Gaza to massive celebration in the streets. I don't know if we have some of the footage. I think we'll display it later, but I have some of the footage that came through on that day as it really happened. And it's just, I broke down because it shouldn't be this way. And
it shouldn't be 2 years, you mean?
It shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be that I am afraid to be who I am, or to wear this necklace or to wave an Israeli flag in the entire United Kingdom. It's obscene. And we should never accept this as something normal.
Absolutely. But it's interesting, though, that on recent campaigning that we've done, we've actually found a lot of support for Israel. So would you draw a distinction between, say, what the government's doing and what the trade unions are doing and perhaps ordinary people? Or are you finding, you say you wouldn't wear your outward signs, for example, on a tube, or would you?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't, right. And would that be because you feel a general tension, or are you just worried about certain people popping up? Is there something?
Well, I think we all know who we're worried about popping up, especially today. Sitting across from me on the way to the pro-Hamas protest that occurred today, there were people, walking around without a care in the world with Palestinian flags and Palestinian pins. And that's what made me think of it today, because I thought, why is it that I'm afraid of the country that I live in, the movement that is essentially a civil rights movement for the most historically oppressed minority in the history of mankind? Why am I afraid of being who I am? Well, these people who are bullies that are supporting rapists and murderers and kidnappers, literally, sadly, it's not an exaggeration. Why am I the person who's afraid here? This is the epitome of the failure of the state. And it's not just in the UK. It's in Germany, it's in Italy, it's in France, it's in parts of the United States, it's in Canada, it's Australia. It's unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable. And no one should be silent about it. And you mentioned, we've also seen some support, and I think that's really true. We've seen a lot of people like yourself, like the work that Our Fight does, really rise up in response to what's happened. And of course, as it's probably my number one focus as a journalist and as an activist, Iranians. We've seen tremendous We've seen a tremendous outpouring of support from October 7th onward. I can't even tell you how many messages of support I got from inside Iran on October 7th itself. The first people to respond, the first people to say, we know your pain, we know what you're going through, we know what you're suffering and why you're suffering. We understand what you have to do and why you have to do it. We understand how the IDF needs to attack Hamas, needs to attack Hezbollah, needs to attack the Houthis, and I could go on and on with all of the proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I don't think that should be taken lightly, because the way that the international media presents it is that Iran and Israel are enemies, and what the Iranian people, the courageous Iranian people have proven, obviously before October 7th, but to the Jewish community since October 7th, is that they are lifelong friends through the centuries, and that they will continue to be. And I think that that is something that everyone needs to understand, both in the state of Israel and beyond, because we are facing the exact same enemy. And we need to stand hand in hand in combating that. I also want to add one more thing about that, and that is that oftentimes the Iranian activists, some of which are sitting here in the front actually, are on very much the front lines to tremendous risk to themselves. When we are activists in the United States or even in the UK, yes, there is a threat. We do get harassed. We do potentially face being doxxed, but that's not the same thing as having your family executed, or potentially you being executed or stabbed or targeted, even on foreign soil. And I know that some of the people here have actually faced those threats. And so again, it's not something to be taken lightly, this solidarity.
Yeah. No, it is incredible that, as you say, that we do face the same enemy, but at the same time, a heightened threat for our Iranian friends. So I know examples, I'm sure you do, of people suddenly receiving a phone call and saying, we know where your brother lives in Iran, you know, that kind of threat. And it makes it, in a way, all the more urgent for those of us who do have freedoms here in this country to exercise them. This is one of the messages that we've been trying to put out with our fight and Stop the Hate, is the idea of that we are able to go out on the streets, we are able to challenge, we are able to make, to some extent, our voices heard, and we need to illustrate that to the rest of the country and get them also to make the same statements. So maybe we could, I don't know if the AV person could set the video rolling that we've got for Emily. Thank you. So Emily has some recordings and she's going to explain to us. We're going to stop and start.
תזיז את הראשים שלכם מפה, תזיז את הראשים. אוקיי, לא. מאמי.
So I should have gave you a warning in advance that a lot of this footage is very difficult to watch. But the reason that I wanted to share some of this with you and share with you in this order is because this is exactly how I woke up. I woke up to the missile alerts in Tel Aviv on October 7th. I live in Tel Aviv, South Tel Aviv. At the time, it was a little bit unusual to see rocket alerts in Tel Aviv, not really something we were expecting. But at first, when I heard the alarms, both Yosef and I kind of thought, oh, they're just, being a little bit more aggressive today. And then I looked at my phone, and this was the very first thing I saw. That video that you just saw. And I was very confused at first because if you look at it, you think maybe it's from Iraq or, Syria or I thought, why are people sending me a video of like ISIS? I don't understand, in the back of a pickup truck. And then I realized it was in Sderot, which made me even more confused because I was like, wait a second, what's happening? And this confusion of what's happening continued for several hours. And the reason that I think it's important to speak about this today is because there are a lot of very, very impactful stories from October 7th, and they need to be heard and they need to be told. But you also have to understand that everyone in the entire country was living in this fear for at least 4 to 5 hours. At least. We didn't know if Hezbollah was coming from the north. We didn't know if other countries were getting engaged. No, the police weren't, answering anyone because they were busy dealing with everything. The IDF was trying to deal with the situation in the south. So no one knew anything. No one had any answers. Even the people with connections did not have any answers. This started happening at, 6:30 in the morning, very, very early on a Jewish holiday. So we didn't really have any answers. And I think I woke up a couple hours after that. So this was the first thing I saw, and then that was shortly followed by the next video, which I'll share with you, which was from the Nova Festival. That was the next thing that I saw that morning at about 9:30 a.m. So this is footage of the Hamas paragliders that, parachuted into the Nova Music Festival, where 378 civilians were murdered from, I believe it was over 40 in the end, different countries, some of which were kidnapped as well. And again, at first when I saw it, I was so confused because it's hard to believe the savagery and the barbarity of what's happening. I think I spent most of the day in shock, but as the footage started to come in, and I'm not sharing with you the worst of it, I started to realize this is a very, very serious situation. This is not just rockets. This is something significantly more serious. I guess we're speaking in the dark now. And that's when I started to realize, okay, maybe we're actually in danger in Tel Aviv. Now, I know that sounds perhaps naive to someone not from there, but in Tel Aviv, you sort of have a little bit of a bubble where you think things aren't going to affect you. Even now, when you see the Houthis firing ballistic missiles, a lot of people in Tel Aviv are like, oh, let me video. Like, people will continue sitting at the bar. They don't consider it so much of a risk. And this is when we realized something is going very, very wrong. And not being able to get a hold of anyone, not being able to have any answers, it was really, really terrifying because we didn't know how far they were going to go. And then we started seeing videos come in of executions and of kidnappings, and I think we have another video here, I'm not sure.
Well, before we show it, sorry, I was just going to ask, because you're describing your experience in Israel, and obviously from people I know over here, the lack of information and the fear and the worry about relatives over in Israel. And obviously, as you say, so many were killed, so many were kidnapped, and people related to those victims not knowing, do you have relatives outside of Israel? Do you have people that were constantly phoning you and all that kind of thing?
Almost the entire day, almost the entire day. In fact, I think it became a little bit of a way to cope because I was so much in shock. But that occurred really much later in the day. The videos I'm sharing with you now all came in pretty much in the first couple of hours that I started to see. And then once we saw the footage from, the Telegram channels of Hamas and from the other Islamist networks that I follow as a journalist, we realized that this was very, very quickly spiraling out of control. And we started to see the executions. We started to see the kidnapping videos. I don't know if you already played it, but if you could show the footage of what they were doing to the hostages, what the Gaza civilians were doing to the hostages as they were paraded on the back of pickup trucks into the Gaza Strip. So when people tell you that, Gazans are the victims, I just want you to remember this. Of course, there are innocent people in Gaza, but the reality of the situation, unfortunately, is that more than 87% of them, according to the multiple polls actually immediately after October 7th, showed that they supported Hamas and explicitly supported the actions of October 7th as well. I'm often asked in interviews if it's kind of like the Gazan people are like the Iranian people and they live under oppressive dictatorship. The opposite is true. The vast majority of Iranians are against the Islamic Republic, whereas the vast majority of Gazans support Hamas. And part of that is because of an extensive network of brainwashing and radicalization from cradle to grave. But unfortunately, that is the reality. And as unpleasant as it is to admit and to say in the West, we're not doing ourselves any favor by pretending otherwise. And you see the same phenomenon here when we're dealing with different Islamist groups. Just before I came here, I was having drinks with some friends, and they were talking about the protest that was planned tonight, and the group organizing it is literally called Intifada 87.
Yeah.
Why on earth would the British police approve any protest being organized by a group called Intifada 87? Intifada literally means violent uprising. There is no such thing as a non-violent intifada, okay? Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or doesn't speak Arabic. That's the only thing it can mean. So the tolerance, this tolerance of intolerance is harming us. It's killing us. It's killing us in Iran, it's killing us in Israel, it's killing Gazans as well, and it will kill people in Europe as well if they're not able to get a hold of this issue and to take it seriously and to hold these people accountable.
I think that's a very good way of putting it, the tolerance of intolerance. And the glorification, in fact, of some of these things, as you say, calling your organization Intifada. We hear it chanted whenever we go and do counter-protests, one solution, revolution, and globalize the Intifada. So could we have the next, is this a photograph?
Yes, so shortly after October 7th, I was not in the South. Later in the afternoon, we had started to get more feedback about what was happening on the ground. Obviously, throughout the day, we saw a lot of interviews even coming in on live TV, people who were hiding in bushes, people who were hiding in, crazy places and bizarre situations, calling into major networks in Israel, reporting on what's happened. Horrific, unimaginable scenes. unimaginable. And I think both Yosef and I spent the majority of the day in complete shock. And I remember that for the first time, we discussed where we would go, how we would get out of the building, what we would do if Hamas came to the front door, how I would get out and what he would do. He was armed, so I said, okay, well, I will go to the other balcony. And they did. They actually did have plans to come up to Tel Aviv, and bizarrely, in a tragic turn of events, Nova actually stopped that. The Nova Festival actually prevented them from getting further, along with the actions of some very, very courageous policemen who called some shots without the proper protocol to shut down the roads. There's certainly no shortage of acts of heroism on that day, remarkable acts of heroism. But we do know that after the fact, from the documents that the IDF has obtained from Hamas in Gaza and from subsequent interrogations, that they did have plans to come to Tel Aviv. And not only that, but they had a whole setup for how they were going to force people out of buildings and how they were going to, execute and kidnap even more people. And about a day and a half after that, October 9th, there was a missile that was fired at Tel Aviv that had a direct hit on the building next door to me, in the Florentine neighborhood, leveled an entire building. At that point, we had been hearing sirens for several days, almost nonstop. And as a reminder for anyone who forgot, Israel did not respond to what happened on October 7th until October 27th, which is why anyone protesting today is not protesting for Palestinians. They're protesting for Hamas, and they're protesting in support of the acts of violence against civilians on October 7th. But we did have a direct hit right on the neighborhood, and I have to say, I've never been in a situation like that. I've been in multiple wars already, but I really thought that they hit our building because it felt like an earthquake. Like the whole ground shook, and all of the living room was like covered in smoke, despite the fact that there wasn't anything on our building. That's how impactful it was. And the second that we went down after, the required time to stay in the bomb shelter, which is actually my bedroom, the other siren went off, back-to-back sirens, so we had to run back upstairs, back into the shelter. And by the time we got down there, about 20 minutes later, I, of course, went to report about what was happening. There were a few people that were trapped under there for about 5-6 hours. And that was the footage the photo that you saw just a few minutes ago. And it was only about a week and a half later that I went to report from Kibbutz Be'eri in the south for the first time, also Kfar Aza, several of the communities that were hardest hit. Significant portions of their entire population were wiped out in these communities. It's difficult even to this day to describe what the scenes were. I've been to Auschwitz, I visited it, it's horrendous, but the feeling, while it was kind of reminiscent of that, it was much more visceral because there were still body bags in the area. They hadn't even cleaned all of them out. You could smell death. I've never experienced anything like that. I remember physically being ill the rest of the day after seeing it, and walking into some of these houses just in the immediate aftermath of what had happened on October 7th. And I think they started playing a little bit of my footage that I took from inside some of the houses. You could see bullet holes almost everywhere. In almost every house, there wasn't a single house that wasn't destroyed in one way or another. You saw houses that were completely burned all the way down to the ground. You saw bomb shelters that had been firebombed. You saw children's beds that were covered in blood, obviously right here. That's one of the examples.
That's not on there.
We'll
play that in a second.
Kibbutz Be'eri.
So just to go into it a little bit more, because I think sometimes we explain these things, and hopefully a lot of the people watching the stream, some of the people here, won't be that familiar with these things. So maybe we could go into a little bit more. So you're talking about Be'eri. there were nearly 120 people murdered at Beirut.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people know this, but the population of Beirut was, I think, 1,000. So when Emily says a significant portion of the kibbutz, that's 120 people out of 1,000. So basically, you're talking about a village in the middle of nowhere in Britain, equivalent. To find somewhere with a population of 1,000, I looked it up on the internet. You've got to go way down the list of places, populated places in Britain. So you're talking about a village called a kibbutz, but it's basically a village. And you're talking about 120 people. So the number of lives affected by that, not just the number of lives taken. I mean, it is, I was going to say decimation, but it is literally a decimation.
And unfortunately, it wasn't only one community. I mean, there are many communities in this area, all very small and close-knit communities that suffered this way. And you know, Kfar Aza and Kibbutz Be'eri were some of the worst. They were some of the first ones that I visited. But it's the scale of it is just very, very difficult to grasp until you've actually been there. And you know, some of the photos that we shared just a moment ago, I don't know if you saw the blood on the floor. That's actually someone who was stabbed.
Sorry, should we play that?
Yeah,
it's on the screen here,
now.
But could we? Oh, here we go. Yeah.
This is someone, one of the residents of Kibbutz Be'eri, who was stabbed, tied, and then burned alive. Also, the children in the home were burned alive. So it's really some of the most horrific human cruelty that I think I've ever heard of. Just really, really savage barbarism. There's no other way to explain it. And it's difficult to even witness it or speak about it years later, despite the fact that I wasn't there. So I can only imagine for people who this was their family members, or you know, they were there. They did survive in some of these horrific situations. It's excruciating. It's excruciating to see. I have many friends from some of these communities, and again, we weren't able to hear from them in many cases for many hours, or if we were, you know, they were locking themselves inside bomb shelters and waiting for hours and hours and hours and hours for the army to come, for the police to come. I've interviewed first responders who lied to people all day long, telling them that the police were on the way when they knew they weren't on the way, or they weren't able to get there in time. I mean, just unimaginable human suffering. And you see here, this is a photo of me speaking with some of the soldiers on the ground there, but the home that's behind me in that photo is not unusual. That's how every single house in that kibbutz looked. It's how almost every single house in every kibbutz on the Gaza border looked. The scale of destruction it's very difficult to comprehend, and it breaks my heart that there are so many people here who are trying to deny exactly that, despite the fact that there is not only so much evidence, but that they boasted about it, that they live streamed this. There were people who found out that their grandparents or their loved ones were murdered because they did it on live stream, on their own social media. There were terrorists who took the phones of people that they murdered and called their parents to brag about how many Jews they had killed. I mean, some of the things that I can't play here, I can't display here, are sickening, physically sickening. And you know, there's been a lot said about the videos that the IDF screened for journalists at the beginning. Some of that footage has been released since then. But I have to say, even though I got a lot of this content, as a journalist, I saw a lot of this content on October 7th itself. Some of it I actually reported on in real time. Watching that video and watching some of the footage that we hadn't previously seen, that hadn't been released, it's the only time in my life that I actually threw up after seeing something. It's sickening is the only way to describe it. And on top of all of this, on top of all of the tragedy that happened on October 7th, we saw scenes like this. This is what was going on in Gaza at the time. This is how they were responding to the videos that were being sent around by Hamas. This is how they're teaching children, as you see in this photo, to behave, to be raised to behave, that the slaughter, that the rape, that the kidnapping of innocent men, women, and children is something to be glorified. And I think the biggest tragedy of all from October 7th, beyond the loss of life, which of course comes first and foremost, is that we have seen the international community completely turn their back on these hostages and completely turn their back on their own values. Because this is not something that should ever be tolerated. It's not something that should ever be normalized. And when you see people, like I saw today, chanting at, King's College and SOAS and all those campuses they walked across, chanting for Intifada, chanting for From the River to the Sea, which necessitates the elimination completely of the State of Israel. I don't know how you can look at that reality as a government, like we see today, and say, oh yeah, we should support a two-state solution, when they are the ones opposing a two-state solution.
So I have to thank you very much for sharing all of those stories. That was incredible. I hope people will share these stories. There's more stories to come, but I hope you'll understand the very visceral experience of people like Emily in Israel on that day, and help us to get the message across. And thank you for helping us to get the message across.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave the stage as well in a second. Thank you so much. So I'd like to introduce Jan McVarish. Jan McVarish. One of the directors of the British Friends of Israel. I mentioned the British Friends of Israel earlier in the context of Allison, and she is going to interview some people and get some stories for you here. Thank you, Jan.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So what Mark and I are acutely aware of is that it's almost impossible to convey and often even to grasp, I think, the enormity of what began on October the 7th. And I say began rather than happened, because I think it was the beginning of something rather than something that happened in just a few hours. Many of us in Britain, regardless of whether we had any prior connection with Israel, had a visceral sense, and visceral is the word that's coming up here, a visceral sense of horror at what we saw unfolding as we looked at our phones or turned on television or listened to the radio on the morning of October the 7th, 2023. And mixed with disbelief at what we were seeing and hearing was the feeling of being very effectively terrorized. And even for those of us very much at arm's length who've never been to Israel, like me, I'm going soon, but I haven't been before. With no apparent skin in the game, other than perhaps having Jewish friends who we love very much, Jewish friends who may or may not have Israeli connections. It was simply terrifying to witness, even from afar. The rules of conflict seemed to have evaporated. I remember seeing footage and thinking, who or what are these people? Who are these men? Some in balaclavas and headbands, and some in flip-flops. I remember seeing a man in flip-flops taking a child's bicycle from a kibbutz. And it really was like the forces of evil had emerged from hell. And I don't normally use that kind of language. That really was the only language that I can use to describe what we saw. The stuff of deep, deep nightmares. And the whole world was turned upside down, not just for Israelis, but for all of us. So the aim of tonight's event is to strengthen our resolve and to inspire others to help put the world back on its feet to put our moral universe back on its feet where it ought to be, the right way up. And as Mark said earlier, the most immediate action you can take is to tell the truth. The truth doesn't just reside in numbers and statistics. We've had 2 exhausting years of battling with those. It comes alive in human stories that we know at a deeper level to be true. So we're going to arm you tonight with more human stories from October the 7th that you can take out into your families, to your friends, into your workplaces, and to your communities. And so first of all, we have the very great privilege of watching a special video that's been sent to us by Eran Peretz. Eran is the father of Ido Peretz. Ido was murdered as he drove away from the Nova Music Festival, and he was driving alongside his friend that he'd known since kindergarten, 22-year-old Niv Tel-Zur. As you're listening to Eran, bear in mind that he is only one parent amongst the thousands of mothers and fathers of the people murdered in one morning on October the 7th, 2023. Please play Eran's video.
Thank you for having me. I was asked by Mel to share with you the story of my son, Ido Peretz. Ido is my youngest son. He is 22 and 8 months old. Ido was murdered on October 7th. And I'm here to share his story with you. I apologize for my English. It's not my first language, but I will do the best. Ido is my youngest son. He went to the Nova Festival on the 6th of October. In the morning of the 7th, we woke up because there was a siren and thousands of missiles were launched to Israel. I managed to talk with Ido 3 times. I knew where he was. We are living in Ramat Gan. It's about 80 kilometers from the Nova Festivals. I knew that he was in this party, and I knew his location, and I called him. And he told me that he's seeing what happened, and they are getting out of the area. Ido took his car, and from the forest of the festival he went to the main road, and he managed to drive about 20 minutes, 20 kilometers south. He was intended to go to a settlement named Miftachim to take a shelter there. During his drive, we talked a few times. He was not running away, he was not afraid, he didn't knew what happened around him. He didn't knew that there was an invasion of thousands of terrorists into the area of Israel. And after 20 minutes, when you go to the Miftachim junction, he was murdered in the middle of the junction, in his car. Also his friend, who who sat beside him was murdered. They were friends from the kid garden. That's what happened to Ido on October 7th. We looked for him for 2 days. And after 2 days, we got a phone call from the police. They asked us to come and recognize Dido. We were at home and we went to recognize them. We felt that our world fell apart. Our life changed after October 7th. We are trying to keep a routine. We get up every morning crying, but we raise our head and we keep going and we keep living. Keep trying to hold our little family together, me and my wife and my older son, Ido's brother. What helps us during those days, months, and 2 years to keep going on is to make everything in his memorial, in memorial of Ido. We are doing what we can. Ido was a very modest person, and this sentence was, "I'm good exactly as I am." It means everyone is good exactly as he is. That represent that he loved everyone. He had compassion for all people, especially for those people that the community don't hug them. He does saw them and he hugged them. I want you all to know that the October 7th for us is a disaster, for our family, for our country. 1,161 people were murdered that morning. Big catastrophe. And we are trying to live on our life, to make everything for the memorial of Ido. I thank you that you are hearing me, that you remember Ido, remember my boy. Remember Ido. The reason that I'm talking to you, that I know that every person who hears me will not forget this boy, and every one of you take a little piece of Ido, and this is very important for me. Thank you, everybody.
And we do remember Ido, and you can tell now, you can tell your family and your friends about him if you didn't know about him already. We will remember that boy. Now, the reason we're able to hear about Ido directly from his father is that he and Ido's mother met a very special person when they were visiting Ido's car at the so-called car wall, which lots of you will know about, but some of you may not. It's a brutal commemoration to the attacks that day of a huge stack of cars, one of which is Ido's. And that's where Ido's parents met our next guest, Mel, who happened to be visiting the car graveyard, the car wall at that time. They started talking. She started talking to Ido's parents, and they have stayed in contact, and that's how we were able to contact him and ask him to be videoed for this event. So, Mel, can I welcome you up on stage? She's going to tell us about our next person. You all right?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Do you want me to go into the next video? That's fine. Thank you for remembering Ido. I went to Takuma. I was in Israel for a couple of weeks. I was doing a bit of SARL work with the IDF. That's the only way I could get into the IDF, so that was interesting. Anyway, next. Yes, sorry. I'm not used to speaking. Next, we will watch a video interview with a wonderful lady called Yael Litchi. My son lives in Israel, and this is his kibbutz family. And she is the aunt of Afir Engel, a 17-year-old boy kidnapped during the October 7th attack. Afir was just a week shy of his 17th birthday. He was in the 12th grade. He's a quiet, humble and creative. He loved building and making things, and with his father and to his family, he wasn't just a nephew, he was like a son. That fateful morning, Ophir was visiting his girlfriend Yuval at kibbutz Be'eri. He'd been expected to stay home. His aunt Yael had been baking his favorite cake. Like many families in their close-knit community, Yael, her parents, her siblings, and their young children all lived near one another in the kibbutz. At 8 a.m., the sirens sounded. Yael and her family ran to their safe rooms, thinking at first it might be a false alarm. They checked in with all their family in the group chat, but as the morning wore on, the messages became alarming. Afir wrote about explosions nearby, about fear, about other rooms burning. Then, just after midday, the messages stopped. Later, they learned that 3 armed men had broken into the safe room, taking Afir, his girlfriend's father, Yossi Sharabi, the brother of Eli Sharabi, and another teenager, Amit Shani, from the kibbutz. A black car was waiting to take them away. From that moment on, there was silence. For days, Yael and her sisters called hospitals and officials, desperate for any news. She describes it as living inside a nightmare. I can't begin to comprehend the pain and uncertainty of that time. Finally, they learned that Afir had been taken hostage in Gaza, along with Yossi Sharabi and Amit, only aged 16. Now we watch Yael recount the events that followed and what happened to Afir during that time.
Can we play the next video, please? Thank
you. He was there the first day they took him. He thought he's going to be dead on the way to Gaza, because he was taken between the last hostages. It was around 1:30 noontime. Yeah. Most of them were taken. I think 15 minutes later, the army came to Be'eri. So it was really the last hostages. And then a lot of bombs of our army were there to stop the terrorists. And he said he didn't believe he's going to live after that. And then he was taken to an apartment in Gaza. And I asked him, did you believe what happened to you? It was like, I'm on my way to Gaza. It's unbelievable. And he told me he felt like in a movie that he told himself, where is the army to stop this nightmare and take me back home? And they went there to a house full of terrorists. And the first thing they told him is to take all his earrings out. He has like 4 or 5 earrings.
Yeah.
He told him, you have to take all the earrings out because you look like a gangster, and it can be very dangerous for you. And it was like, I'm a gangster? Come
Wow.
on. You see his picture, he's such a cute boy. So we were laughing, and then they gave him long sleeves clothes because he has tattoos, and it's also gangster stuff. So, and the whole time he was not in the tunnels there.
Good.
He was all the time above
Good.
ground. So it was really, but most of the days they sat in a small room in the dark. They were not allowed to talk at all because the terrorist knows that our army have devices that can record voices. So he told me that one day, he told it also on television, so now I can tell it. He went to the toilet and he saw a small window there. And he was getting close to the window and he said loudly, my name is Ophir, I'm alive, I'm okay. He thought maybe someone.
Yeah.
And I think that someone heard it, but it's only my thoughts because we got one time in all these 54 days, we got a sign of life from him.
Okay.
It was very, the army tells to his parents, and we were not supposed to tell anyone.
Who was he actually with in that room? Was that was his girlfriend's father, or?
In that room, he was all the time with Yossi Sharabi.
Yeah. Who is Ellie's brother, who was eventually, yeah.
And he told us that after, he told us about the food. It was very, very little food. Most of the days, maybe half a pita in the morning and half pita in the evening. And a few times they brought him a lot of food Friday, and then they had to finish everything. And if not, it was very bad.
Wow.
And it's very hard to eat a lot after you didn't eat for...
Yeah, it's dangerous as well, yes.
And there was a lot of psychological terror there. They told them all the time that the country does not care for them. Everything is like usual. They haven't seen anything on news, so they didn't know anything. They just, a few days before they came back, Ophir told me they heard in the radio, Arabic radio, so some words, so they understand Hudna, it's a ceasefire, and few words, they understood something is happening. Another thing, Ophir told me that the first thing he wanted to know when he got to Israel is the condition of his girlfriend and her mother. He didn't know anything. And he asked, the first question he asked when he came to the Israeli car is if they know anything about it. And the doctor there, she knew, and she told him they're all in good condition and they're waiting for him. And it was like, you saw the film that he's meeting Yuval.
החזרה של אופיר מהשבי הייתה לא רק משאלה שהתגשמה, אלא גם רגע שבו התקווה שהסיוט הזה יכול להיגמר טוב התעצמה. בימים הראשונים בבית החולים יובל שמעה מאופיר על אבא שלה, שאיתו הוא שהה בכל תקופת השבי.
I haven't cried, honestly, it was just like...
I stood there, I stood behind Yuval.
Yeah.
And I was like...
You can't, the outpouring is just incredible. How is it being under those extreme conditions? How's things changed since he's come back? How is he now?
It's a very hard question, Mel. Because first of all, because it's very personal to him.
Of course.
And second of all, because he was taken in an age that people change. He was taken 17, he came back 18, and it didn't end yet until everyone is back, and especially Yossi. He was the last person that's seen Yossi alive, that talked to Yossi. I think there is a lot of responsibility on his shoulders, and he's still maybe not trying, but I can tell you that he went to a year of service in the Golan Heights, and he finished it now, and he's going to the army. So
that's very brave.
His course of life, I think it says a lot of his condition. First of all, I want to say thank you to all the people all over that's coming and thinking about us and trying to do whatever they can to finish or to end this horrible situation. And I want to remind everyone that October 7 was not something Israel began. I want everyone to remember that we were attacked brutally, and things, I don't think people saw everything that happened there. Nira told me what she saw after they went out evening time when the army came to rescue them, and she described to me the bodies and the babies and what she saw around. I didn't want to hear it, but people has to hear it because they have to understand that we didn't start this war because we want it. I want them to know that most of the people in Israel does not want to kill women and children that are not involved. Most of the people in Israel want to finish this war and just live their lives with peace. It's very, very important to know, because I know that what you see all over the world is not that. And we are people of peace.
Thank you so much for talking to Yael for us, Mel. And I wanted to ask you, so people at the beginning and the end of that video, they'll have got a tiny glimpse of the kind of things you and a lot of other people were doing, a lot of people who are probably in this room, what you were doing to raise awareness from the very first moments, awareness of the plight of the hostages. So can you tell me what it was like to see hostage posters and ribbons repeatedly attacked, even now in London yesterday?
Well, as you know, there's many people in this room, not just me, that constantly put up posters, stickers, ribbons, and to see them cut down. Only yesterday we saw somebody violently cutting down yellow ribbons for the hostages, 48 as we know, that are still in Gaza. And I was out one night, for instance, putting up some stickers and yellow ribbons in East Finchley, and a couple of students came out and just chased after me and called me I confronted them, and they just called me a baby killer and a rapist. I think they just want to reverse the narrative of what's it got to do with people in what's it got to do with the war. These are normal human beings. They're not just Jews. There are stuck in Gaza. There are people from many nationalities. I mean, they're human beings. You wouldn't rip down a dog's poster. They don't want to admit there are Jews suffering. They don't want to. I'm not a baby killer. I'm not a rapist, and that's what I get called all the time. Is reversing the narrative. They don't want to see that Jews are victims all the time. It's just. It's horrendous, and it's pure anti-Semitism. That's exactly what it is, pure anti-Semitism.
And it was always very noticeable that a lot of the people taking those down were very, very young.
A lot of young people. The two people that attacked me or attacked the situation that I was in, they were students coming out of a college around East Finchley. They were 18, 19, they don't understand anything, totally brainwashed. They thought it's, this is it. This is something I've been told to do. I don't know if they've been paid to do it. A lot of people are paid to do these things. I just think they just believe this is the in thing to do. What is a yellow ribbon? I mean, I went to a street in around the back of East Finchley, and this Irish woman was going absolutely mental with me, hanging yellow ribbons in her street. And I explained to her what it was for, and she said, "Oh, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in the hostages." So I said, "If it was St. Patrick's Day, would you like me to put some green ribbons up?" And she said, "Well, that's okay then." So it's madness. I mean, a yellow ribbon is for hostages. It's a national symbol for hostages. And because it's for Jews, they think it's all for Jews. It's not. It's for human beings that are stuck in the most awful situation in Gaza. They could be Thai people. I think they said it's about 52 different nationalities or people who've got joint passports. It's outrageous. It's pure anti-Semitism. That's long and short. That's what it is. And to scribble people's faces out or put Nazi symbols on top of hostages and just literally rip them down the second they're up is absolutely disgusting.
Yes.
I don't understand it.
It's very, very difficult to understand what that is. But I think our conclusion can only be that we've got our work cut out to overturn the moral inversion amongst those young people in particular.
Absolutely.
Listen, thank you so much, Mel. And I'm going to bring on some other parents now. So next we're going to hear from two more parents whose children were caught up in the terror of the Nova Festival. Thankfully, both of them escaped alive. And so can I invite Dr. Elliot Sorain and Hilla D to join me on the stage? Hello. You're going to sit.
I'll sit here.
Hello, can I give you a kiss? And you've got a microphone just there. I'm going to start with Elliot, if you don't mind. So you are British-Israeli, and you're a consultant in orthopedics and trauma, now based in London. And before we hear about your son Ariel's experience of escaping the Nova Festival, I wondered if you could just give us a bit of some of the kind of longer context to October the 7th, because you have got a really extraordinary perspective on it. You've spoken quite a lot in the past 2 years about how so much of your life has been spent dealing with the aftermath of Hamas terrorism in Israel. So from that perspective, why is it you think that us Brits failed to see how interconnected the terrorism of Hamas is with the terrorism that we experience here in Europe?
Yes, firstly, it's a pleasure and an honour to be here. Such a fantastic audience. Thank you for coming. Yes, I've dealt with, I operated on the wounded from the second Intifada, from the major bombings, the Dolphinarium, young teenage girls dancing at a dance club in Tel Aviv, Mike's Place, the Mike's Place bombing, 2003, April the 30th, that was my birthday. Both of the terrorists of the Mike's Place bombing in Tel Aviv were British Islamists radicalized on the internet, both British, one from London, one from Derby. I operated on countless wounded and injured from these bombings. And why do the British see it's not connected? I could tell you a little story. When I came to work in Derby in at the end of 2004. And I gave a lecture on bomb blast trauma. And I spoke about the second Intifada. And the consultants at the time said, that's very interesting, but it's really got nothing to do with us in Britain. We're really not that interested. It's never going to happen here, and we're not very interested. And I said, okay, fair enough. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm getting married in a few months. And they go, oh, we're not coming to Israel. They were terrified. Anyway, then the 7/7 bombings happened in Britain. And suddenly, everyone wanted to hear my lecture in UCH, in the Royal London Hospital. And the consultants from Derby, two of whom devout Christians, They said, well, you know, Intifada in Israel, Intifada in London, it's the same. And they came to my wedding. I took them round. I took them to Mary's Well, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I took them around. British people do have some lucid moments and do understand. However, listen, it's complicated. It's difficult to understand. British people fundamentally look at things as fair. It's two teams. They don't understand the concept of the ideology of what is Hamas? Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood. This was founded in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna. It's a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And whether it be Hamas or Daesh, ISIS, or the form of Islamism which has occupied the Islamist regime in Iran, occupied Iran, the Islamist regime in Iran, which is currently in control there. We're talking about a triad of, with respect to the Muslim Brotherhood, the Arab version of Arab supremacy, religious supremacy, and a global caliphate. And, you know, if you're in the West Bank in Israel, you see on the walls, it will say on the walls, أولاً الشعب السبت وبعدين الشعب الأحد. And that means first we'll kill the Saturday people and then we'll go for the Sunday people. And this is something we have seen everywhere. It repeats itself. You know, what's to say, just a Bible quote in the book of Ecclesiastes. You say, "Ein kol hadash mitachat hashemesh." There's nothing new under the sun. It's the same story. We saw it in Afghanistan. There were Jews and there were Hindus and Sikhs and Zoroastrians and Christians and Buddhists. And now this ideology is an ideology of death. And I must say, it is extremely important to understand, this ideology predominantly kills Muslims. Politicians in this country are scared to call out Islamist terror groups. It's insane. It doesn't make sense. The Islamist regime in Iran kills more Iranians than anyone else. I know it's obvious, but people don't understand that, okay? And particularly in this country, they pander to terror groups. And in fact, if you call out a prescribed terror group in this country, you can be accused of a hate crime or a public order offense. It's insane, okay? There is, as Winston Churchill said, you keep feeding the crocodile, you hope it'll kill you last, eat you last. Listen, I'm digressing here. Basically, British people, they've got some funny ideas, and they do not understand that the aspirations we have in Western society. Okay, a lot of us like sushi, we want to have a nice car, we want our children to have a good education, we want to go to a shopping mall. It's hard to understand that there are so many people that like death and like killing, and they do it because they want to do it. It's not that they have some hard done by grudge and grievance. The vast majority, even 100 years ago when the Muslim Brotherhood was formed, the vast majority were literate professionals. There were doctors, there were journalists. Also this insane British idea when they talk about doctors and journalists somehow as being holy people. Listen, I'm a surgeon, okay? I'm fully aware that the head of Al-Qaeda, the deputy head, Ayman al-Zawahiri, a doctor, pediatrician, George Habash, a doctor, the head of the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, Hafiz Bashar al-Assad, ophthalmologist who studied here at Moorfields. And my friend Shlomi Ziv was held in captivity by a doctor and a journalist. So this nonsense, it just doesn't make sense.
No, it's such a brilliant. It's such a brilliant point, and obviously it's in the papers at the moment. These particular doctors who are, well, we're waiting to see if they will eventually be disciplined, but it looks as though there's going to be a great application of pressure to the GMC in order to actually discipline these doctors. And that's something perhaps we can all get involved in somehow.
I don't have words to express the situation. The GMC does not have any threshold or any definition for Jew hatred. For the first time, I might add, yesterday, a doctor, he's already retired, but he's been suspended for Jew hatred. It's never happened in the history of the GMC, so maybe this is the first time. But we are seeing in this country an erosion of professions, but that's another subject.
I wanted to talk to you a bit more about the fact that you're very intimately connected to 3 very different outcomes from October the 7th. Your son Ariel's escape from the Nova Festival, your friend Shlomi Ziv, who you mentioned, kidnapped and thankfully eventually rescued. And we should also say the tragic loss of your cousin Jake Marlowe. So can you speak to us about whichever of those that maybe you're most thinking of today, if that's not too difficult, or whatever you want to tell us?
I'm thinking of Jake today, but it's not my place to speak. Lisa and Michael will speak. All I can say is a wonderful man, a huge man in height. Jake, with a huge heart and a hysterical, his laugh would fill a room. That's not for me. And as for Shlomi, thank God he's out, and Shlomi can talk for himself, thank God. The story of my son, listen, I want to say one thing. The day of hell I had on October the 7th was one day. And my son is alive, my son is well. For one day, my son suffered, and I went through this. This was one day, less than a day, in fact, until I knew he was safe, you could say. How I felt that one day, the hostages and their family, they have been living in that fear for 2 years now, every second of every day. So, you know, we say in Hebrew, katonti. For me to say, it is difficult for me to... Listen, my son survived. My son, if you want to hear the story, it's the story is I woke up in London in Mill Hill. For some reason, I couldn't sleep. It was kind of weird. Went down very early in the morning, about 7 in the morning in Britain, and I turned on, I've got the Israeli TV, I turned on, I saw something was going on, and you know, there's a thing you do whenever you hear something. It said a terror attack in the south. I think it said like 11 people killed at the beginning, and you know, what you do is you ring up, it's an excuse basically to ring my son. So I ring him up and I press on the WhatsApp, and for some reason the video came on. You know, sometimes you ring someone, you don't really want to video them, and I did. And I see my son running in a field. And I said, what's going on? And he's going, I can't talk. He kept putting the phone down, kept ringing. Eventually he didn't pick up. And I thought, that's very strange. Why is my son running in a field? My son lives in North Tel Aviv. Maybe he's just seemed a bit peculiar. And then things got worse and worse. Things came out, and I'm watching the news, and it's all blowing up. And eventually, it transpired that he was there, and I was very, very worried, as you can imagine. And then it turned out, then he got in touch with me, he was safe. What had happened to my son was he was at the Nova Festival, and he was the designated driver, driving a Renault Clio, which I got for him. Beautiful little car. But we'll get to that. Then he was the designated driver, so he hadn't drunk anything. And when the rockets landed and there were mortars, he said to his friends, let's get out of here. The music festival's going to be cancelled anyway. Let's get out. Let's get out before there's a traffic jam. Anyway, when they get to the car park, they all get in the car, and he sees a woman being shot in the head. And my son had the foresight to say to his friends, let's get out of the car and run. Because everyone who stayed in those cars was killed. My son's car was hit with an RPG, and it's probably part of this wall you were speaking about before, this car. As I said, a beautiful Renault Clio. But that's... my son ran. My son had the foresight to run. My son took his friends, and he ran and ran. And as he was running, people around him are dropping. And he said he saw a sea of people. He said it was like one of these zombie movies, a sea of people. He said there were terrorists with weapons, with Kalashnikovs, with M16s. He said there were just random people with flip-flops, just taking out hammers and knocking people on the head. He said it was a sea like... He said it was shocking. And he got out with his friends, and he's doing well now. Sorry, I've spoken enough.
Thank you, Elliot. And I do feel really, really honoured that both of you, well, all of our speakers have decided to be here tonight. We don't take that lightly. I really, really, genuinely feel very honoured. So, Hilla, your daughter Mayan was at the Nova Festival as well. How did she escape?
Well, it was her first ever rave festival thing, and she asked about it a bit before, and they told her, oh, it's on the Gaza envelope, and she said, is it safe? And they said, yeah, all the parties are there. And it was, for her, it seemed like really bizarre, and she spoke to her, the person who was sharing her flat, and she said to him, maybe I should cancel. And he said, no, don't be silly, you go, you'll have a lot of fun. And they left, got there like also in the middle of the night. I asked her, you there already? She said, no, we're leaving around midnight or something. And they got there, they had their canters, they each had like around the tent, around thing, there were groups. And they separated, people separated, partied with their friends, with different friends. She also didn't drink. She said, I'm not gonna drink. And when it started, when they arrived, she told her friends in the car, you know, we're so close to Gaza, maybe we should just map ourselves if anything happens, so we know which way to go so we don't go into Gaza. And they laughed at her, but they looked. And then when it started, the music stopped, and they told them to lie on the ground, and then they said, so that, you know, we're getting in the car and get out. So they started getting in the car, and one of them lost his wallet, so they were looking for the wallet, he was looking for the wallet, and the time that it took for him to find his wallet, I think they realized later they missed the first batch of terrorists, because they were like circulating them. And also, if I understood correctly, they weren't parked exactly where they were meant to park, so it was easier for them to exit. And lucky for her, the guy who drove did the gateway driver course in the army. They got in the car, and within 30 seconds, he got them into the main road. They overtook all the cars that were parked on the way. There was a white car that the girl who was in there spoke on the first night. And it took them a while to understand that a lot of people in the cars they overtook were actually shot. She sent me a very short video the other day of when they were there, and you hear the rockets, and they heard machine guns, but they didn't click at the time. Only after, when they replayed it, they realized there was machine guns. They're not even sure if they came from the kibbutzim or from there, but it was evident. And they drove and they went to Saad, to the Migunit. Saad is a religious kibbutz, and they didn't open the gates. But they were in the Migunit outside, and they heard the machine guns. They realized there were terrorists. They got back in the car and started driving off towards the Rot. As they left, the terrorists got into the Migunit. On the way to the road, they were stopped by a Rav Shatz, it's the security guard of one of the kibbutzim, told them, turn around, terrorists taken over the police station in Sderot, go the other way. So they turned around, they thought it's gonna take us another 45 minutes, should we, shouldn't we, blah, blah, blah. Eventually they went the long way around. And when she messaged me, it was 6:45 here, so it was 8:45 for her, and the whole way, she was thinking, should I call mom, tell her I'm sorry, or I love you? And she didn't want to worry me, so she didn't. And when she messaged me, she told me, I want you to see it before you see the news. I'm okay, but my friends aren't. And we're looking, and she spent the entire day when they got to one of the houses of their driver, and their parents made them all breakfast, and they were just messaging everybody all day, trying to find them, trying to find everyone. Somebody was shot in the leg, he was hiding, was waiting for the army to get him. A close friend of hers was murdered. There was a lot of things happening, and as she told me, I realized what a big thing it's gonna be like. My childhood's nightmare is terrorists. We had like 3 terrorists infiltrating my town, waking me up at 5 o'clock in the morning when I was 8. I know what it's like. I know what the shotguns sound like. You hear it. They kidnapped a 4-year-old girl. They murdered her. They murdered her father on the shores of Nahariya. And I know what they're capable of. So this, for me, when I heard terrorists, and you think about 3 or 4, and it's scary, and you think thousands were in there. And only 3,800, by the way, were Nukhbas. The rest were civilians. And just imagining that they were literally, I think, survived with tweezers by the Almighty. It was just sheer luck.
Yes, and I think somebody said to me earlier today, your children are probably unusually well equipped to survive in many ways, because so many people, maybe even at that festival, had been in the IDF. They probably were relatively fit. They knew how to help each other. All these stories of heroism are really extraordinary, and we like to think that we know people over here who might do this, but we really doubt that a lot of the time, that people would actually even just have the instinct anymore to help somebody and be effective in helping somebody, even if you've got the instinct. So thank God that you have the children of Israel that you have got, and thank you so much for telling us your stories.
Thank you.
So I'd now like to bring up, we're going to leave the stage, and then we're going to bring up somebody who's been incredibly important. But first, I'm going to thank Amanda Tragan, who has done the most astonishing job of helping prepare this evening. Clearly, lots of you know Amanda. She was the person who, or one of the main people in executing the exhibition that you've seen in the other room. But also, not only was she doing that at extremely short notice, she was also preparing all of these interviews that we've done tonight, finding people for us to talk to, and helping me to understand what I should be asking people. And she's just absolutely phenomenal. So can we have a big round of applause for Amanda?
Can I say something? Just if it's very quick, because while Emily was talking, she said about the Intifada, and at the beginning of the war, I looked it up, and Cambridge and Oxford dictionaries very undermine the explanation of what the Intifada means. Actually, only Collins dictionaries say what it really is.
Listen, if you want to understand the Middle East, you've got to speak Arabic. And the shocking thing is, people in the West, you think you know better than people in the Middle East. You don't, okay? There's a reason Islamist terror groups are banned in Morocco, in Tunisia, in the Emirates, in Jordan. There's a reason. There is a reason. And people in the West think, and they think they know better than Iranians about Iran. They think we're like, it's dancing bears and it's some football match that they can talk. It's not. This is reality, okay? And they want to kill everyone in this room, okay? Islamist terror groups, every single one of us, okay? And I had the honor of serving in the IDF alongside Christians, Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, Druze, fighting shoulder to shoulder against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, okay? It is dangerous what this country does, and it is dangerous.
Thank you so much. I am going to move on. I'm going to bring Aviva on stage because she's got to say a few words.
Good evening. It is my honor to thank the following people. The Leslau family for their generous donation, which made it possible to book this hall this evening. Amanda, Milland, and everyone else for putting together all the displays. Bob and his fantastic security team who've kept us so safe and so well this evening. I'd like to thank Gina for Gina-ing, for your endless energy and invaluable work connecting everybody together this evening. I'd like to thank all the volunteers for all their help and dedication at all our events and for helping us so well this evening. Thank you to Allison and everyone at British Friends of Israel. I'd like to thank all of our speakers. Emily, Hilar, Elliot, and Allison. Thank you to this beautiful venue and all its wonderful staff for all their professionalism during our planning of this event. Thank you to Mark and Jan for conceiving and organizing tonight's event. And on a personal note, I would like to thank all our allies, every one of you who have stood with our community, even before October the 7th, 2023, and continue to do so now. And everyone here this evening, including those watching on the live stream, thank you all so much for being here. It really means a lot. Thank you so much.
And thank you to Aviva. She said, thank you, Mark and Jen, for organizing this, but actually this was amazing. It's an amazing team effort, and I hope it's something we can do more of, because there's a great team of people now who've got involved and who really want to get the stories and the message out, and hopefully we can do more events and things in the future. So thank you. So Allison, I would like to bring Allison down for our final segment. Allison Pearson.
I should say we're very lucky that Mark's here because he's normally arrested. So rare is the moment when he's not in the embrace of a Metropolitan Police officer.
When you say embrace. And I've been able to add German police officers to the list now.
Yeah.
But Allison, a little bit like Emily, the first time I met you was also on the street.
Yes.
You were, well, shortly after October the 7th, I think it was November actually, you put out a call in the newspaper and said that you were going to be by the Churchill statue.
Yes.
And it was on, I guess, Remembrance Sunday.
Yes.
And there you were, making this clarion call to people that they should stand up for civilization, just barely a month or so after October the 7th. And as I mentioned earlier, you were also one of the founders of the British Friends of Israel.
Yes.
And I have to say, we've got to give them another round of applause. Because they were so quick and so clear. They had very clear statements that they stood with Israel, that Israel had the right to defend itself. And they were immediate. And a lot of people, I think, had the confidence and clarity as a consequence of this. It just presented a marker that people could refer to. And then obviously you're a well-known journalist, a well-known interviewer, and I guess that's what we're going to talk about now, some of the people that you've interviewed, some of the major names that people in this room who've been campaigning will know about around the hostages and around the war and around Gaza. So welcome, Allison. Thank you.
How British Friends of Israel came about was the friend Laura Dodsworth. Some of you will know her as the marvellous author of Free Your Mind. she was a great sort of COVID campaigner. And Laura WhatsApped me, I think it was just a couple of days after the 7th of October, and she said, I feel so helpless, what can we do? And it was already clear that these really ugly protests had started, particularly that one outside the Israeli embassy, and they were still retrieving the bodies, and many of the kibbutzes hadn't even been reached yet, and it was pretty obvious how ugly it was. So a number of us, Toby Young, Jan, a number of us decided that we would try to get some signatories to the October Declaration. And a lot of great people came forward. And the thing that really struck me was Sir Tom Stoppard, who I believe is our greatest living writer now. And Tom gave a typically nuanced statement, but he said that when all the territorial dust has died down, will this not ultimately be seen as a battle between civilization and barbarism? And I have to say, we've all been through some very bumpy times. Not the easiest calling in the world being a British friend of Israel, I can tell you. But I have never, ever wavered. It's a battle between civilization and barbarism. It really is.
And this is the third event that the British Friends of Israel has partnered with Our Fight on. So the other part of Tom Stoppard's thing, didn't he come up with this phrase that we're on the precipice? Yeah. And that was the title we used for last November's event, which you kindly spoke at. Yeah. So I'd just like to say, on a personal level, you have been a supporter of Our Fight since its inception as well.
Well, you guys do all the rough stuff. I'm just typing, mate.
Not everybody likes rough stuff, so we are incredibly grateful that you.
Well, as Mark said, I have interviewed some remarkable people. I've interviewed mothers of hostages, two daughters mercifully recovered, thank God. Emily Damari and Roni Ganan. Hooray! And also, parents who've lost children. And we've just heard from people there about the Nova Festival, which I think must be one of the most, notorious slaughterhouses of the modern era, if not of any era. And I recently was very privileged to interview Eli Sharabi, who came out of amazing, and who's written a wonderful book, Hostage, which despite all the darkness it describes, is also a testament to, I think, to Israelis, actually, to the absolute spirit of, somehow I will get out of here. And
well, that was something I did wonder, actually, because you were so clear on October the 7th, did you have some kind of affinity with Israel before, or did you have any?
Well, I know lots of Jewish friends. My husband works in America. Lots of our friends in America are Jews, and on October the 7th, my best friend who lives in Scarsdale, Jewsville, I think, so she always says, I'm Jewish, honorary Jew, and Sharon started sharing some of the WhatsApp messages and footage that she was getting, some of which I don't think, once you've seen certain things, I was thinking about all the people I'd met and who I wanted to tell you about, but there's one person who particularly stands out. This is a woman called Shari Mendez. Shari lives in Jerusalem. She's an architect. She's in her early 60s. She has children, some of whom are in the IDF. But I just thought I would. This is very difficult, what I'm going to read out, but I'm going to read it out because one of the things that's very rarely discussed is the sexual violence of the 7th of October. And I think everybody should know about this, okay? So Shari Mendez was part of a small, all-female unit which was there to help take care of the bodies of women in the event of a mass casualty event. And people here will know that in the Jewish tradition, it's the women who prepare female bodies for burial. So on the night of October the 7th, having got an alert message, Shari drove to the Shura army base to join her unit. And these are her words. My first shift was Sunday morning. It was unimaginable. There were refrigerator trucks lining up as far as you could see. There's this massive intake area like an airport hangar, and it was packed with bodies. Body bags stacked one on top of each other right up the walls. Hundreds of bodies. The smell was incomprehensible. I don't even know how to describe it. You couldn't breathe. The smell was so bad. Literally gasping, struggling to breathe. The floors were wet. Fluids were dripping from the body bags. There was blood on the floor, so much blood. It was like walking into horror. Shari's first job was in the identification room. I can't overemphasize, she says, how shocking this was even to professionals, like they were forensic doctors, army photographers, army dentists, physicians, all in this room gathered around a girl's body, trying to establish who she was. Most of the people in my unit have no medical background. We're normal people, secretaries, lawyers, retail workers. And suddenly there we were dealing with things that no one ever thought you could deal with. Many of the bodies were so disfigured or destroyed, you couldn't tell if they were soldiers or kibbutzniks or young people from the Nova Festival. Some were just piles of ash. There's an imperative in Judaism that the modesty of the dead woman should be respected. Even in the rush and in the horror, Shari said, we said, please let's cover the body when no one's working on it. And everybody said, yes, let's cover her. I was so touched by that. You know that takes sensitivity in the midst of that unimaginable nightmare. And it was our job to do all the touching of the women that wasn't medical. If clothes needed to be taken off, we'd take them off. And it's important to give back to the family all the little personal effects. We were taking things out of pockets like cigarette lighters. Every single thing we wiped off the blood, put it in a special bag with a number to go in a certain box, to be returned to her parents. The team did their best to take off the jewelry. Sometimes it was very difficult. These young women had nose rings, and their faces were completely smashed up. And I'm squeamish. I'm working with a dentist, trying to take off a nose ring, and there's nothing left of her face but the nose. The girls were shot many times in the head, Shari told me. Why? We saw that these women were shot to be killed, maybe in the heart, in the head, but then they were shot many times in the face. And it looked like systematic mutilation because it seemed like they wanted to ruin these women's faces. A lot of them were young soldier girls, and a lot of them had been very beautiful. The first few we saw weren't too bad because they think they might have been caught in their sleep, and Hamas just shot them while they were asleep. But after a while, we got women who had clearly been awake when they were murdered, and these women came in and their mouths, their teeth were in grimaces and their hands were clenched, if they had hands. We got notified that a woman's coming in. She has no legs, so the terrorists cut off her legs. There was clearly immense sadistic violence. A lot of the women had bloody, stained underwear. Some had no underwear at all. Girls were shot in the breast, they were shot in the crotch, and that was not done to kill them. There was so much violence, and it was totally sexual. So Shari Mendes went to the United Nations in December 2023 to tell them about the sexual violence, the unbelievable depravity that Hamas inflicted on women and girls. And as well as Jewish girls, there were Christian, Druze, Hindu, and Muslim. The UN was slow to respond to the mass violation of Israeli women. Some of you will remember the hashtag #MeToo, unless you're a Jew. The UN is supposed to represent all nations, Shari said, and they had this exhibition there. It was the International Day of People Who Were Killed in Conflict and Terror Attacks, and they showed a picture of every single terrorist attack that happened that year, but they did not include October the 7th. They did eventually send the special representative of the Secretary General to Israel, and Shari and others testified to Pramila Patten. Her report said there were reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred across multiple locations of Israel and the Gaza periphery during the attacks on 7th of October. After October the 7th, Shari and her colleagues worked 12-hour shifts non-stop for 2 weeks, often sleeping at the base. You asked me, Allison, how could I bear it? You asked how we got the strength. I remember thinking I was just in shock and everybody was just doing. We were using masks and they were giving us lavender for the smell, but all the senses were being assailed. By the third, fourth day, I was losing it and I thought, I don't know that I can do this anymore, but I had to. After the bodies had been definitively identified, they were taken to a second room, the burial room, where the atmosphere was calmer. And it was just us women, said Shari, with the young women. The team would look after her, showing all the tender care that was the opposite of her final moments alive. One morning amidst the grey, the team saw a flash of pink, a beautiful manicure with a flower on each fingernail. And that was such a terrible moment for all of us women, said Shari, because a manicure is such a sign of hope for a woman. They're making themselves beautiful, aren't they? It was the only colour in the room. Shari said, I tried not to know the names. I didn't want to associate them with their families, to learn they had a dog or a sister or a mother who was crying. I made that mistake the first day, and it almost destroyed me. I didn't want to know who she was. I had to keep going. Shari says she knew probably she'd be the last person who saw the young woman, and that's a responsibility because they could have been our daughters. So I asked Shari Menders, of all the young women's bodies that she took care of and prepared for burial, how many were in a fit state to be shown to their parents? There was total silence, and she looked at me. I could not tell if her eyes were full of sorrow or glittering with rage. None, she said at last. Not one girl could be shown to her parents. I'm sorry, it's a lot. That happened, Mark, to those wonderful young women, and they should never be forgotten, ever, ever. And can I just say that sometimes I see these young women on these marches in London. I think, are you insane? Do you not know that young girls your age, what they did to them? I just wish that we could somehow tell them, because, they would kill them. Hamas would kill them in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah. And I think we somehow have to convey to people as well that as a parent, you're the parent of these young women here in Britain. I mean, this is what could have happened to your kids. Everything we heard on the sofa in the previous segment about parents' fears and worries. Some of them didn't come home. This is something that we need people to understand. These are normal people doing normal things on a Saturday morning in a small village of 1,000 people, and then normal kids going to a music festival, and then the torrent that comes out from what you described there. But what about when you talk to people over here about it, because your articles and your interviews seem to get actually quite good response in the Telegraph and places. How do you find?
Well, I think, the Telegraph, I think, has been very staunch, and I'm very proud of that. And I have to say, as a journalist, I just feel despair with most of the broadcast media. I used to be a television critic, and I was always been a fan of the BBC. I want them to lose the license fee for their coverage of the Jews. I really do. And
that seems to be the biggest cheer of the evening.
Do you know what? Night and day, we have to, people like my mother, people like members of my family, they pick up their information from these people. So they'll say, oh, it's terrible what the Israelis did. And then you ask what it is that they've done. So back in May, there are so many examples. I'm sure everyone here has been seething, which I am. But back in May, there was a guy called Tom Fletcher, medic guy from the UN. I woke up and I turned on the radio, and he was saying 14,000 babies are going to die in Gaza in the next 48 hours, right? I've been a reporter. I'd be asking, Where's that number from? 14,000 babies. Where are the babies? What haven't they got? Why is nobody doing anything about this? It was absolutely astonishing. And sure enough, a few weeks later, the UN issued a retraction, and Mr. Fletcher said, I need to be more precise with my words in future. No, you lied. You didn't need to be precise with your words. You lied. And that lie, this horrendous man who attacked the Manchester synagogue, Al-Shami, said, shouted at them, I'm doing it because of the children. This information that's being put out, unscrutinized from, the Gazan Health Authority, like Hamas. Everything coming out of Gaza is Hamas, okay? And there's another example just recently where a Panorama documentary talked about Israeli IDF firing on the aid convoys. I met IDF soldiers. There may be some rogue ones. I don't believe the IDF is firing on aid convoys. I just don't. And then there's now, last week, a retraction. Oh, maybe the BBC didn't mention that Hamas were firing on the aid convoys. So as you can tell, I'm pretty enraged about it. I'm also enraged about the fact that our Prime Minister this morning discovered that there's some anti-Semitism in the UK. Yeah. Ooh, amazing.
Well, I was going to ask you how you felt about that, because I've
written about it in the Telegraph tomorrow.
Good. Well, because so the reason I ask is because I saw a video a couple of days ago, which I remember seeing before, where you were interviewed before a campaign against anti-Semitism march. And you were explaining in those kind of clips that people do where you explain why you're on the march. And you were explaining that it was a terrible situation, that Jews didn't feel safe in Britain and people felt endangered. But this was 10 months ago, this video. This wasn't 2 days ago after Manchester. This was you took. So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about this sort of drive? We're trying to tell people what's going on.
Well, I imagine a lot of people, and certainly people in Manchester who were interviewed, I think there was just a grim sense of inevitability that it would happen, and it did happen on Yom Kippur. Obviously, incredibly distressing. I think people inside the synagogue, a lot of the men who were blocking the doors could have been. I mean, it was terrible, but it could have been a lot more dead, I think. And I think the only, for me, Mark, the only slight good thing to come out of it is it's there, isn't it, right? It's undeniable now. People are having to have, BBC, All My Bet Noir, having to have discussions about, there's anti-Semitism. And it was actually quite amusing for a few days that the BBC website and others had said that police were still trying to establish a motive.
From Jihad al-Shadi's motive, what could it have been?
What could possibly be Mr. Jihad's motive? And you have to almost just laugh, don't you, really? But as the wonderful surgeon said earlier, we have a terrible Islamist extremist threat in our country. We have. They keep trying to tell us that there's a far-right threat, but what we know is that there are over 40,000 jihadists on the MI5 terror watch list. So that's not very safe for Jews or indeed for anyone else, is it? So I feel just contempt for much of the political class, which I think that the Labour government has found it politically expedient to drop the Jews. That's what I think. I mean, that might sound harsh, but I'm afraid.
I think so. I think you're right. So we've overrun a little bit, apologies, but maybe you mentioned, when you mentioned Eli Sharabi, you said, and I know in your interview you said you thought you were going to find something negative and desperate, and actually you came away with the opposite. So maybe you could leave us with some comments and thoughts on Ellie?
Yeah, I went to Tel Aviv to interview Ellie for this book, and I was apprehensive. I think I began the piece by saying I'm going to meet the saddest man in the world, and I guess lots of people here will be familiar with the story. But Ellie lived in Kibbutz Be'eri extremely happily with his British wife, Leanne. She never converted, but spoke great Hebrew, although Ellie said we always argued in English, which I thought was very funny. And they had two lovely daughters, Noya, 16, and Yahel, 13, and the girls had had their birthdays in the first week of October. So when Hamas came into the house, the front room, the living room was full of party balloons, so it must have been like a scene from a horror film, really. So Ellie and Leanne decided that they wouldn't put up any resistance. They could see lots of the kibbutz was ablaze, as Emily showed us some of those pictures. And he would go with them, and because Leanne had a British passport and the girls did as well, they would leave them alone. That was the theory. But Ellie was dragged off, and I think they believed that Leanne and the girls were murdered very soon after, but he was taken into Gaza and held for most of it in a tunnel, 491 days. And I hope you all read the book. It's absolutely, of course, it's horrible. It's starvation and torture and so on. But this remarkable man came up with a plan for not letting go of civilized values, right? So every night he said to the three younger men with him, we're going to come up with some good things that happened today. Now, as you can imagine, the available menu of good things was quite limited, but he said, okay, so the very cruel one didn't give us the food today, so the less cruel one did, so that was good, or we had tea with a bit of honey or something like that. And they literally did it, and he describes it as building up a muscle of positivity, you know, we will survive. And his lovely young guy, pianist, he's in there with, he's still in there, Alon. And when I spoke to him, yeah, please God, he's going to come out in the next fortnight, please God. But, yeah. But just to say, I guess I came away from that meeting worrying that I was going to meet this man who'd suffered intolerably, came out, and the girls and Leanne weren't there to meet him. How absolutely. But he refuses to be devastated. He said, everybody gave so much support. I cannot wake up every day and cry. I just have to go on. And he's written this marvelous book. And we were joking that Hollywood was going to pick him up, and he's definitely going to be played by Brad Pitt. So it's all going to be. But just to finish, Mark, I would say that we may, on our side of the cause, civilization against barbarism, we may get disheartened, and sometimes I think, come on, Israel, help us a bit with trying to support you, because you don't always make it that easy. But if Ellie can suck that up and emerge positive, then so can we, right?
Thank you so much, Alison. Okay. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, all our speakers. So one of the things I found very moving is he said in your interview that he wasn't going to let the sorrow define him. He was going to let it run alongside, which I have to say, even now, you know, I'm thinking, what incredible. So you can't halt your life, but equally you're not going to forget. It's part of you. It's part of him. So incredible interview, and as Alison says, the book, I think there's a pre-sale QR code downstairs which you can get. So I just want to finish briefly a kind of call to action, really. After October the 7th, I kept hearing the phrase, there is a time for peace and there is a time for war. And Elliot mentioned Ecclesiastes earlier. I'm an atheist. I'm not even sure if I pronounced that correctly. I don't believe in God, but I after a funeral I went to, I heard a little bit more of Ecclesiastes, and I thought, I've got to check this out because it is quite an amazing sequence of couplets. At the funeral, what prompted me was, I think it goes, there's a time to cry and a time to dance. And I thought, after everything we've been through these last 2 years, and the constant refrain I hear at these protests and our counter-protests, where we say, we will dance again. And I thought, what is this Ecclesiastes? Well, you know, the things that it contains. And so I looked into it, and I saw all these different couplets. And the one that really caught my eye, and the one that gave the title to this event, was it's a time to mourn, and there is a time to speak. And obviously, we've heard some terrible stories, and we've heard some stories of bravery and resilience and people rebuilding their lives. But the message I would really like to get across to everybody is it is time to speak. It's time to take these stories out and make sure people know about them. As Jan said earlier, the bare minimum we can expect is the truth. We're not asking everybody here to come out on a protest or get arrested or come out on a counter-protest. There's lots of things you could do, and we would love you to join us. But the very least we demand people to do is to speak the truth. The example Allison gave of Tom Fletcher saying that 14,000 babies would be killed. Now, she's quite right that the BBC are lying, the mainstream media lie, he lied. But we have to ask people, why would you even believe that? Why would you even believe, ordinary people I mean, not the media, why would you even think that that was possible in that short space of time? Why would you think that the IDF used children for target practice? Bizarre. Why would you think that Israel wants to starve people to death? And so we have to force people. The truth is our ally here. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope you get involved in one of the campaigns that we've mentioned this evening. But the truth is our ally. Thank you very much. Sorry. The exhibition will continue. There's also a bar downstairs. And do you want to explain the video?
This is a video that Hillard's daughter Maya has put together for us. Please enjoy it.
Bring me home. Bring me home. It's been way too long. Where did we all go wrong? That they're all the days, can't imagine the haze. No clue what's going on. Please save them from fading, from drowning where it's raining. Please save them from the demons in the dark. בלילות של סיוטים זה כתוב על הקיר, אין כבר אין אוויר, אז תחזירו אותם הביתה, תחזירו
Fascinerende Donner.